Welcome to the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast, where we equipped you to more effectively lead your seat at any employer, business, or industry in which you choose to play. Each week, we help you sharpen your leadership acumen by cracking open the playbooks of dynamic leaders who are doing big things in their professional endeavors. And now your host, leadership tactics and organizational development expert, Karen Farrell Rhodes.
Welcome back to the podcast, and thanks for joining another episode designed to help you better lead at the top of your game. As you know, for season 3, each month we're featuring leaders who have fascinating roles in a particular profession or industry. And today's episode is part of our special series featuring leaders in the healthcare industry. And now, enjoy the show. Hello, my superstars. This is Karen, and welcome back to another episode of the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast. We're so thrilled that you are joining our special series this month on leaders in the healthcare arena. And we have an absolutely fantastic guest with us today who's going to give us a unique view of being a leader inside of a bigger enterprise level organization. We are so pleased to have on today's show Dr. Paul Peek, who's the VP of Clinical Pharmacy at Sedgwick. And Sedgwick is a company that they take care of their people after stressful events with technology-enabled risk, benefits, and integrated business solutions for various industries and markets. I probably still murdered that, but we're going to give Paul a minute in a second to clarify and give us more details about Sedgwick. But before we do so, we want to first welcome him to the podcast. So welcome, Paul.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Oh, we're so happy to have you. I can't wait to dig into your job and your thoughts on leadership. But before we do so, we always love to learn just a tad about our guests. So for as much as you feel comfortable, would you mind giving us just a sneak peek into your life outside of work?
Yeah, I've married and have a family with 4 kids. And right now that takes up a lot of my time outside of work. I've got kids ages 11 through 17, almost 18-year-olds. So I've got 3 of my kids are teenagers and of driving age. So I spend a lot of my time right now just making sure everyone stays safe and getting their hours and reps in before getting their licenses and all that. And with 2 about to go to college, I'm spending a lot of time just trying to soak it all in, when they're still at home. So enjoying a lot of that.
Do you know what? Your kids are of such great age ranges and they're experiencing life in different ways. So I'm sure that's super fun for you and your entire family.
It is. We're enjoying it. It's fast paced, but we're just trying to soak it all in.
Oh, we'll do, because as a recent empty nester, it is a shock, and time flies by. I still remember my little 6-pound baby girl, the last one out, but she is fearless in the world these days. So that is wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. We appreciate it.
Of course.
All right. Well, I am first going to allow you to give more information about what Sedgwick does and your role at Sedgwick. I cannot speak today. Sorry, listeners. I'd love for you to give more clarity to that, because I think I murdered that a little bit, but I want the listeners to really understand the world that you are leading in right now.
Sure. So Sedgwick is a leading global provider of claims management, loss adjusting, and technology-enabled business solutions. And so our company provides a broad range of resources for clients' needs tied to casualty, property, marine benefits, and brand protections, and other lines beyond that. My specific role, though, is within that casualty. So you think about workers' compensation. My role is within that group. And then within that, we have what we call, of course, managed care to support our workers' compensation injured workers and our clients. And so I work within that pharmacy group that makes sure if you're hurt on the job and you need medications, we want to make sure you get the right medication at the right time to help you recover and get back to work. So that's my main focus within Sedgwick.
Wonderful. And I know it's not just you. You have a team, correct?
I do. So we have about 5 other pharmacists that work on our team. I also work on our vendor network side. So I work with our pharmacy benefit management partners. And so I kind of have feet in both segments. So I get to have that 50,000 foot view of seeing what's happening from a pharmacy perspective across our book of business and look at our spend and our savings on behalf of our clients, but I also get to work with our pharmacists and see what they're doing at that 500-foot view as far as working with providers on impacting the type of care that our injured workers receive. So I was brought in over 10 years ago when the opioid epidemic was at its height, right? And so you think about 2014, 2015, a lot of opioid overuse within not just workers' compensation, but across the whole healthcare sector. Of course, people, a lot of unnecessary deaths tied to opioid use and drug use in general. But and
Yes.
that's still a big issue. But of course, that was a big problem within workers' compensation 10 years ago. So I was brought on to help address that clinically, talking to providers about how we could decrease the doses of those opioids and find other safer medications. And so that program has continued to kind of grow and still is very necessary within workers' compensation and making sure that there's medications that can harm the injured worker or the patient, and there's medications that can hamper or delay recovery. But we want to make sure we find ways to get them those medications that actually help them that help and help them with getting better, getting back to work, and have that value, right? And I think that's a big part of pharmacy these days is making sure that patients have, again, the right medication at the right time to help them recover and get back to their healthy lives.
Absolutely. I know just a smidge about this area because I actually worked for 4 years for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Florida and in Miami. I believe they're still based there, but in Miami at the time. And this was telling my age. It was way back before the opioid crisis was big in the news. I mean, it was probably the 15, 18 years ago. But even back then, there were still medications. It wasn't in the news as it is as much now, but
Mm.
there were still problems and with people abusing certain pain meds. And we were having conversations back then on how to best collaborate with, the doctors and the patients for optimal care at that time. And then you fast forward to these days and you add the opioid crisis into it. I mean, it just blew it to another level. So I can definitely understand the deep value of the work that you and your team bring to your clients everywhere. It's so needed, so very much needed. What trends are you and your team seeing right now as it relates to the education? And I am assuming your team helps approve or not approve or works with suppliers to approve and not approve on a case by case basis. I'm just curious what trends that you're seeing in the arena that you are working in right now, both from a client perspective and with your partner relationships.
Yeah, it's interesting because we are in a bit of a niche market within workers' compensation. Workers' comp is such a small percent of the larger whole as far as healthcare goes. You think about
Yeah.
the larger pharmaceutical industry that's really kind of supporting Medicare, Medicaid, the commercial side of it. Work comp is very different. And so we're aware of what's happening within workers' compensation, but also what's happening outside of work comp. So for us specifically in workers' compensation, our issues are a bit more niche because we're seeing things like medications dispensed out of the provider's office. We see things like high cost topical medications where you and I might get perhaps an over the counter lidocaine patch or cream, something like that over the counter and pay 20, $30 for it in workers' compensation because in our world, the patient doesn't have any kind of copay. It's all kind of paid for by the employer. Those medication costs are astronomical. And so we're seeing a lot of those things impacting us from a spend perspective. But I think the larger area of pharmacy is becoming very interesting as medications continue to get more expensive. And so we're aware of that as well. We're not seeing as much of that as the commercial side is, but in the commercial side, you think about there's one segment of pharmacy we call specialty pharmacy, and these are medications that require very specific administration, storage, usually often injectable medications, and these are really driving up cost. And so the average cost of a specialty medication might be $2,000 or $3,000 per month, right? But that sector of pharmacy is growing because a lot of the newer medications coming to the market are within that specialty sector. So over half of the new drugs that come to market these days fall within that specialty side. So I know the commercial side is seeing these increases in costs, and that's driving a lot of the issues. And I think there's a big
Yeah.
tension here with the patients wanting to have access to affordable medications, but the newer medications being more expensive. And how do you address that? Not to mention, there's just in pharmacy in general, there's always just been this kind of opaque model in place where it's really kind of a convoluted ecosystem where you have manufacturers, you've got wholesalers, you've got the pharmacy benefit managers, you have the physicians, you have the pharmacies, then you have the patient. And it's unique in the fact that you have this kind of ecosystem where it's really one of the one industries where you as a patient will show up at the pharmacy and you have no idea what you're going to pay for this medication. You just know you have to get it. And so it's got there's a lot of tension there with kind of that lack of transparency and what drives a lot of these costs. And so we're aware of that as well, making sure that our clients have access and our patients are being provided medications that are more value driven and as far as reasonably priced, but also even more importantly, just as effective, right? So we have a team of folks that we work with, our clinical team, and we have an intern program. And so we spend a lot of time each week reviewing the clinical literature. We want to make sure we know, hey, what medications that are coming to the market, what are those drugs? And then what's the value do they bring? Are they just like the medication that came out 6 months ago and has a similar type of adverse effect profile, or are they showing new better abilities as far as what they can provide for a patient? And so we're aware of all those aspects, including, of course, the GLP-1s, the weight loss medications that you've heard a lot about in the news that
Yeah.
were originally, of course, and still used for diabetes treatment. And so we're keeping it with things like that. Like how is that impacting the commercial sector, but also our sector? So if you think about workers' compensation, you might think, well, I don't know why someone who's hurt on the job would need a medication that helps them lose weight. But if you think about certain situations, there might be a need, right? If someone is overweight and in order to have a surgery, they need to lose maybe 10 to 15% of their body weight, is this a medication we should consider? So we look at all those things, trying to stay in the loop and staying up to date on the latest trends and what's happening within the pharmacy market. And just for me, as in my role too, it's staying educated, right? Because again, there's not a lot of transparency in this world, and knowing the different players, all the acquisitions that happen from time to time, the consolidation of these larger health insurance groups buying up these PBMs and these specialty pharmacies and kind of aligning in certain ways and knowing who those players are. So it's a lot to keep up with, but I enjoy it. It's
I bet.
important to know kind of what's driving this world and kind of how it operates. That's part of the trick to it. So
No, it makes a ton of sense. I'm curious because your department, if you will, is just one of multiple departments at your company. So I'm curious in how you try to keep your team's North Star in alignment with the overall company goals. And how do you advocate for the fantastic work that you and your team are doing?
we have great leadership here. I think that's one big piece for us is having leaders who understand within managed care and above the important parts that each segment plays. So, and getting to actually even work in different sectors. So recently I've been asked to kind of help pilot and work with our team that's putting together something specific to physical therapy, right? So we have I think it's working for folks who understand the larger managed care and just the larger idea of healthcare, that it's not just what you take medication wise, it's also the activities you do, it's your mental health. And so we have even
Right.
within managed care, we have a department on behavioral health. We now have physical therapy. I'm getting to kind of work with them. And so it's kind of getting to collaborate with different areas and see how these things kind of all work together and realize that, when I came to through pharmacy school, I think it didn't take long to realize that there's way more than just medications, right? That are important for our health. It's what you eat. It's your level of activity. It's your mental health. It's how you interact with your community. And so I think I've seen that play out in my work life, realizing we have all these other departments that also care about these various issues, and seeing these things kind of interplay together just shows you that healthcare in general is not just one stream. It's really many streams coming together and helping people recover in the right way. So yeah, I think it's because Sedgwick does so many different things, and we've kind of got professionals in these various areas, and we have our experts in a number of different places. I think it really helps us provide a comprehensive solution in that way. So I've enjoyed that aspect of it. I've never felt like the pharmacy world wasn't getting its attention. I think we kind of all understand the role it plays and how that ties to, whether it's UR review or physical therapy or behavioral health, whatever it might be, telephonic case management, other things that we're doing as a team, they all kind of work together for one.
Love that. Love that. Well, because you do manage a team and then you're also probably part of the leadership group as well at your company, I'm curious about what your approach to leadership really is and how do you personally strive to build a high performing team within the pharmacy group?
Yeah, for me, I've learned over the years that I'm all about the people. I try to be a good people person, and it's making those connections and building that trust with others that I work with. I think initially for me, when I first kind of being trained as a pharmacist, I didn't go through business school. I didn't go through anything that necessarily gave me leadership training per se. But I think as I've kind of come along just as a human being, right, and having kids, I've learned the importance of, I mean, the growth mindset for me has been a big piece that I think was new for me as I grew up I'm still a recovering perfectionist, right? So I grew up knowing, this is what I have to work very hard to perform and make sure that I'm showing up in the right way and that people really love what I'm doing. And I think in that mindset, when you're more of a fixed mindset and not in the growth mindset, for me initially, at least for most of my career until probably the last 5 to 10 years, my mindset was like, all right, I can do these things well, and no one touch it, right? Like never really being courageous enough to kind of take a risk or kind of go outside that zone. But I think the growth mindset and understanding more and more that, hey, it's okay to kind of be a human and fail every so often and actually learn from those mistakes and the gifts that come from that and the growth that comes from accepting that was a big piece for me. So as a leader, I try to accept those values and realize ultimately, as a human being and knowing a bit more about my own needs and my own vulnerabilities and where I struggle and being okay with those things makes me a better leader. Because I could tell you one of the biggest things someone said to me a while back was, you have more power than you're showing up with. And I think what they meant was is you're kind of holding back because you're afraid to make a mistake. And if you would just let those things go, there's more to you to bring to the table that could really help and encourage people. And so I try to be a leader that first and foremost cares for the people he works with, and makes that connection. I'm a big believer in the energy we bring to the workday, especially
Yes.
in this work from home environment where I think we've just lost so much. I'm actually in the office and I like to come to the office. There's not as many people here as there used to be, but I just like that human interaction. I feel like the connections we can make as humans are really critical just to give someone a bit more of a boost and give that
Yes.
energy. And so I'm all about making those connections, building trust with folks. Because I think when you have that, then you can speak into the challenging things, right? You can kind of lean into those hard conversations when you have to, because they understand, hey, this person is for me and is for my good, even though they're giving me some feedback that maybe is difficult to take in. So I've tried to accept that's kind of how I'm wired, and that's how I like to lead.
Wow. We have so much in common, Paul, because one of my former bosses told me that had a great performance review, and they were saying we used to give peer feedback and leader feedback. And on the peer feedback side, they said your peers want to see even more from you. And they love, the ideas and insights and things you have, but they couldn't find anything constructive other than saying they wanted absolutely more. And that resonated with me in the sense that I'm an idea person. I always have thoughts and perspectives. But because I'm so sensitive and am a people person, I never wanted anyone to think I was showboating or taking over the conversation or
Yeah.
what have you. And I know that was probably my own psyche that I was having issues with. But, just for that feedback to say, "Hey, share even more." It opens the doors for even richer conversations and even deeper connections, and so that was a lesson I learned probably middle into my career as well, so that was something we have in common there.
I totally relate to that completely.
Yes. And for your team, how do you encourage them to share ideas or improvements or give feedback or give you a heads up about things that they're hearing or reading out in the market? How do you encourage that on your team?
I think first and foremost, we make this space for it. So we have the time and make it very clear the intentionality of, hey, this is the time to, what are you hearing? What are you seeing? We actually have, again, dedicated a meeting every week about, hey, what's new and the literature and what are you hearing? What are you seeing? But also have made time with my direct reports about talking through different things I'm learning as a human, whether it's a book
Yeah.
I'm reading and kind of walking through those things. Like, hey, when I first read The Growth Mindset, I took that to my team and we talked through it. I think it's important
Nice.
for folks that I work with to also, or even people that report to me, to hear that I'm always learning. I'm always wanting to learn new things. I don't have it figured out, that it is a journey. Because I think there's just something, again, there's something that you get a good energy from a new idea or thinking of some new perspective. And so I'm always trying to encourage that when I can. Don't always do it perfectly, but that's part of the process. So I think it's making that time, but also as me as a leader, kind of modeling that as far as what I'm picking up on, or the latest book I've read or the podcast I've heard. I try to share those things when I can. So they kind of pick up on that idea of, hey, the growth always continues and we're always as humans trying to find new ways of doing things. And so that's a big important part for me.
And also, Paul, from what you observe and hear from your team, what do you think your staff's major concerns are, maybe say for the next 6 to 18 months in the field of healthcare? Do you hear they have concerns that are top of mind, either from them personally or professionally, or things that are going on in the industry? What are some of the themes of the main conversations that they have with you?
Yeah, I think from an industry perspective, I think the folks I'm working with, I think the things that concern us are always, how can we improve the way things are done? I think, there's no perfect system. Workers' compensation has its own issues like the rest of healthcare. And I think there's always a bit of a breakdown between the intent and the desire of what the provider's trying to do and the medications that they're prescribing and how those are impacting the patient and us trying to intervene. I think we're always looking for better ways to interact and to have better conversations around those things, or even better
Yeah.
solutions. I think, of course, technology is a big part of that for us too, is finding new ways to better service folks. So within managed care, with where I work, we're doing a lot of cool things with AI to more efficiently really kind of see within the medical documentation, like what are the issues, and kind of more quickly figure out what needs to be addressed, and also using that type of technology to help figure out, okay, who should be looking at it. So I think we're always looking for ways to, I think, solve problems with technology when we can, just to make things work better and more efficiently on behalf of our clients and the folks that we serve as far as the patients. So those are probably some of the two bigger things. I think as far as maybe personally, what I hear, it's not so much complaints, but I think I'm always, again, going back to making sure that folks that I'm working with feel that sense of connection and you're collaborating. I think, we're still only a few years into this post-pandemic world, and really still figuring out what work looks like today. And so I'm always intrigued and interested in how to find new ways of doing things and keeping those connections. So because I've always sensed, like, once you, if you're kind of working on your own for a while, and some people love, again, to work by themselves, and that's energizing for you, and I think that's true. But I do feel like at some level every human needs that sense of connection, and I find myself
Yeah.
concerned that there's kind of this sometimes unnoticed maybe sense of loneliness that's kind of there for certain people that we're
Yes.
not quite attuned to. And again,
Yeah.
so building that connection and having those conversations, like there's a newer kind of product I'm supporting, and we have a newer employee, and so I'm making sure I'm connecting with him every day if I can, and make sure there's conversation. And it doesn't have to be work focused. It can just be, hey, how's this thing going in your personal life, and building that connection. Again, I just
Absolutely.
think it helps us more move towards better collaboration and just a better sense of overall mental health when we have those types of connections in our life. We spend way too much time at work, I feel like, to not kind of lean into those relationships. I know it's, boss and
Yeah.
direct reports, sometimes we get concerned about keeping it all about business. I think it's something really important about creating that human connection, especially in this new age. Because if you think about it, Karen, that we have colleagues coming to work today who are new to our industry or new to working in general out of college, they'll never know what it's like to work in an office. And so,
I
that's just
know.
that's a new framework to consider. And so trying to kind of make sure we build that level of connection and have a good sense of checking in when we need to on other people, and having those conversations.
You're so right about that because they will miss out. I mean, of course, I love people. I'm chatty. You can tell. I mean, I really valued and continue to value relationships at work, but they won't get the experience of the meeting in the coffee room, and talking about, I don't know, the Super Bowl, or spontaneous conversations, or interacting with each other every day, because you end up noticing people and their mannerisms and things, and that deepens your knowledge and understanding of them. There's a whole psychology around that, which I won't bore you around, but you're so spot on that there's a whole generation that will miss a lot of that unless we, turn back a little bit more. But I think about the pandemic, we were kind of pressed to one end of that spectrum when we were almost totally cut off. And, we still talk about the amount of depression and
Yeah,
loneliness and mental stress everyone went through. And then in some ways, we switch the pendulum to the other side. I think, me personally, I think it's going to be critical for everyone to find the right balance for them and for what's right for the businesses as well in order to thrive.
yeah.
But that's just Karen's perspective.
I completely agree. Cannot agree more on that.
But for you, Paul, what do you do to help balance work and life, or prioritize work and life?
That's always such a good question. I'm always trying to find new tricks for that. I think one thing someone shared with me recently that's been super helpful is, I've got 4 kids, so for me to come home, it's to be engaged and to show up, right, and to
Right.
be present. I think my wife will tell you I fight to be present, and sometimes it's a struggle with certain situations at work happening, but for the most part, I really try to do that. And one thing that someone shared recently was learn to parent your phone, meaning putting my phone away
Yeah.
and parenting it, letting it have a break for 12 hours and not touching it or looking at it. So I've done more
Yeah.
of that recently, even taking even on the weekend more time away from my phone. I think is super critical, even as I'm a parent trying to figure out how to parent my own kids with a device, right? Which is an unknown world that I think we cannot get educated on enough.
I
Um,
know.
so I think for me, it's just that it's just fully. I think, and that's part of the reason why I come to the office. I have a home office. I can work there if I need to. My wife's also at the house, but we have the 2 dogs who, for me, sometimes can become a bit noisy. So I like being here though because I come here like I can be fully present when I'm at work. And when I shut that laptop down at 5 o'clock, I feel like I'm done. I'm good for today. And of course, if something pops up, I might have
Yeah.
to jump on later. But I like to be at the house and then fully engage with whatever's happening there, and rest until the next day. And so that's what I've had to learn how to do. Is really for me, it's keeping the devices away when I need to, and parent the device, and realize it's got to be somewhere else, and I can be with my kids and my wife.
Oh, that is fantastic. And you know what? As far as I can tell, the world hasn't blown up
It hasn't.
because you put your phone
It
down for
hasn't.
just a few hours.
Yeah, it hasn't. It's true.
I love that. Well, Paul, before we let you go, because we're about needing to close, we'd always love to ask our guests a signature question about which of the leadership tactics that I write in my book really resonated with you. And all 7 listeners are equally as important, but we always love to see which one pops for our guests. And Paul, you were so kind to mention that leading with executive presence really resonated with you. And for my new listeners, the way we define this is your ability to make clear and convincing, either oral or written presentations, or have those kind of conversations in order to influence others to follow your lead. So it's basically about making your case for whatever you're leading in such a way that energizes and compels others to want to participate as well. Dr. Paul, curious minds want to know, why did leading with executive presence really resonate for you?
I think for me, it kind of goes back to that. You know, being a good leader means being a good human. And I think as I've kind of gone through my own trials of life, and as my own sense of growing into who I am, it's learning that knowing where I'm going is really critical about where I'm trying to go as a human, how I'm trying to care for my family and my kids and care for others and neighbors and things like that. But I think knowing your direction is just so important, and then knowing how to bring people along. And I think a lot of that goes back to having the right and really kind of showing up with the energy of the presence that you have. I think the way that we show up with people is just so important. I know at times I've been on a call with someone, and if I'm not listening really well, I have to kind of check with myself, because I think that, listening well to the people that you work with is important, and really hearing them for what they're saying and not just what you're going to reply with, and really showing up and having an impact with your leadership style is important. I think that executive presence is just really important, because I think ultimately at the end of the day, when we get to the end of our careers, I think we're going to look back and say, like, hey, how did I show up for the people I worked with? I was at
That
last month was at a retirement dinner for a colleague of mine who just left our company, and she was here when I joined, and she was such a critical part of what we do here. And if you were to listen to all the toasts and the speeches given, there's very little talked about business or decisions made.
no.
It was way more about how she impacted people as a leader and as a human. People were emotional and really had a lot. There's a lot of impact, and I took a lot from that. Just a good reminder of that's the kind of leader I want to be. That at the end of the day, in people, they talk about what I did or didn't do well. At the end of my career, it won't be so much about he made this decision or not this decision, or he had this type of revenue growth. It's more about how was I when I showed up? Did I show up in the best way possible? And so that's why I think executive presence is such an important part for me as it relates to leadership style.
I love that. And you know what? From my perspective, Dr. Paul, I think you're doing an excellent job
Oh,
in showing up
thanks,
and,
Karen.
and making a difference.
I appreciate that.
Well, we are about needing to close, unfortunately, but listeners will have a ton of information in the show notes with Dr. Paul Peak's bio, how to learn more about Sedgwick, and a lot of other resources that are going to be in the show notes. But I always love to give our guests the opportunity and the airtime to also share with you where you can find more about them and the company. So, Paul, where could folks find more about Sedgwick and you?
Well, we have an online website for Sedgwick that they can go to. I believe it's sedgwick.com. You can check that out. But
Okay.
we have
Wonderful.
a
Yep.
whole online presence for our clients and those who are looking to know more about us. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me there. I don't get other places in social media to kind of keep myself present, but you can find me on LinkedIn for sure.
That's wonderful. Well, Paul, we really and truly appreciate the gift of your time today. This has been an absolutely fantastic conversation, and we are so happy that you were able to make time for us and share insights, a little bit about industry that most don't get an inside peek into.
Thanks, Karen. So glad to be here. I've really enjoyed the time with you today.
Thank you so much. And thank you to listeners for the gift of your time, because as I always say, there are literally millions of other podcasts that you could be listening to, and we don't take your patronage lightly at all. All that we do ask that you do is please like and subscribe to the podcast and share with just one friend, because by doing so that will help us all to learn how to better lead at the top of our game. Thank you so much again, and see you next week. Take care. And that's our show for today. Thank you for listening to the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast, where we help you lead your seat at any employer, business, or industry in which you choose to play. You can check out the show notes, additional episodes, bonus resources, and also submit guest recommendations on our website at leadyourgamepodcast.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn by searching for the name Karen Rhodes, with Karen being spelled Karan. And if you like the show, the greatest gift you can give would be to subscribe and leave a rating on your podcast platform of choice. This podcast has been a production of Shockingly Different Leadership, a global consultancy which helps organizations execute their people, talent development, and organizational effectiveness initiatives on an on-demand project or contract basis. Huge thanks to our production and editing team for a job well done. Goodbye for now.